You can survive a stupid financial mistake at 25. After 40, the same mistake can become a permanent reduction in the size of your life. That is the brutal arithmetic nobody wants to say out loud. The world keeps handing you advice designed for youth, for people with 40 years to recover, 40 years to earn, 40 years to repair a bad decision with energy and time. Then you reach 40, 45, 50, and they still tell you to play the same game. Swing harder, chase bigger returns, be aggressive. Find the next rocket ship, make up for lost time. That is how ordinary people destroy themselves. I have spent my life watching money, but what I have really watched is behavior. And the truth is simpler than most people want it to be. After 40, wealth is no longer mainly a game of brilliance. It is a game of filtration. If you want to build real wealth after 40, you need a filter. Not a fantasy, not a slogan, not another hot tip, a filter. A filter is what keeps poison out of a water system. It does not make the water glamorous. It makes the water usable. The same thing is true of your financial life. After 40, the great advantage does not come from finding a dozen brilliant moves. It comes from removing the few decisions that can contaminate everything else. You have less time than you used to. You have more to lose than you used to. And the margin for stupidity is narrower than most people can emotionally tolerate. That is why I want you to stop asking the usual question. Stop asking how to get rich fast. That question has wrecked more middle-aged people than bad luck ever did. The better question is this: what keeps dragging people back into financial mediocrity after 40, and how do you filter it out before it enters the system? Once you ask that question, the fog starts to clear. The first contaminant is leverage. Borrowed money makes weak ideas look strong. It makes impatience look intelligent. It lets people feel powerful before they are durable. That is why it seduces clever people. Leverage whispers the one sentence adults over 40 most want to hear. You can catch up quickly. No, you cannot. You can blow up quickly. That is different. A 25-year-old who gets hit hard still has the possibility of a long recovery. A 50-year-old who cuts his capital in half is not facing the same mountain. If you lose 40%, you do not need 40% to get back. You need about 67%, lose half, and you need to double your money just to stand where you used to stand. Arithmetic does not care whether you feel optimistic. Arithmetic does not negotiate with regret. Arithmetic does not give senior discounts to bad decisions. That is why I've always preferred a slower fortune to a dramatic recovery story. The first rule of compounding is not to interrupt it unnecessarily. Yet most people interrupt it constantly. They panic out, they lunge in, they borrow to accelerate, they mortgage tomorrow so they can feel relief today. That is not strategy, that is contamination. If you are over 40, I want you to hear this with a cold mind. A leveraged mistake is not a setback. It is a filter failure. It is letting acid into the reservoir. It does not matter how smart you are, how educated you are, or how convinced you are that this time is different. A wonderful number multiplied by zero still becomes zero. I have seen brilliant people destroy themselves with borrowed money, because intelligence without restraint is one of the most dangerous forces in finance. The second contaminant is overspending, not dramatic overspending. Not private jets and champagne. I am talking about the quiet version, the one that hides inside ordinary life, a few $100s too much every month. A standard of living built 1 inch above what your income can safely support. Small recurring indulgences that become fixed obligations. A house that looks responsible from the street but colonizes your future from the inside. A car payment that eats freedom every month and gets called normal because your neighbors made the same mistake. The person who spends a little less than he earns lives in one universe. The person who spends a little more lives in another. At first the difference is invisible. Later one person has options and the other person has chains. That is the part people miss. Overspending is not mainly about consumption. It is about the destruction of optionality. It reduces your refusal power. It takes away the ability to wait. It makes you tolerate jobs you hate, bosses you should leave, partnerships you should reject, and investments you should never touch. Once your life requires every dollar you earn, you are no longer allocating capital. You are feeding a machine that demands monthly sacrifice. After 40, that machine gets more dangerous because time is no longer abundant. You cannot casually lose 5 years and call it education. You cannot casually refinance your dignity and pretend you will fix it later. Later is shorter now. That is why one of the most important wealth moves after 40 has nothing to do with picking better stocks. It is building a lifestyle that leaves room. Your filter must reject expenses that permanently narrow your future. If a purchase weakens your ability to save, wait, negotiate, or recover, it deserves more suspicion than most people give it. The third contaminant is unreliability. This one confuses people because it does not look like a money topic. It is one of the biggest money topics in the world after 40. Many of the best opportunities do not arrive in public. They move through trust, a recommendation, a quiet partnership, an introduction, a seat at a table that is never advertised, a role someone thought of you for before it was ever posted, a private deal offered to the person who has behaved consistently for 10 years. Wealth after 40 is not built only through effort. It is built through confidence. Others have in your steadiness. If you say you will show up, show up. If you say you will deliver, deliver. If you say you will call, call. That sounds almost childish until you notice how rare it is. Broken promises burn through reputational capital in youth. People sometimes forgive inconsistency as immaturity. In maturity, they read it as identity, and they are right to do so. You may think of yourself as smart, but if people cannot rely on you, your filter is broken. Opportunity will keep flowing around you instead of through you. You will spend years trying to make up with cleverness what you lost, through avoidable sloppiness. The fourth contaminant is intellectual stagnation. A great many people arrive at 40 with a dangerous illusion. They think experience automatically becomes competence. It does not. Experience can harden into wisdom, but it can also harden into outdated confidence. The world keeps moving. Industries mutate, skills decay. Economic structures shift. Technology changes the reward system under your feet. The knowledge that made you useful at 30 can become half valuable at 50 and almost worthless at 60 if you stop learning and keep performing the old script with more force. That decline is rarely dramatic at first. It is slow, it is polite, it is almost invisible. Then one day you see younger people moving past you, not because they are inherently better, but because they stayed in motion while you became fixed. They did not worship novelty. They simply refused obsolescence. If you're over 40, you do not need to become a teenager again. You do need to become a learning machine again. Read constantly. Study your field, study adjacent fields, study incentives, study how your industry is being repriced. Study how value is migrating. Study what the younger people understand that you still dismiss. This is not self-improvement theater. This is filter maintenance. If your system cannot reject obsolete assumptions, bad decisions will keep getting through while you keep calling them common sense. The fifth contaminant is emotional decision-making. Now, we are in the part that really ruins people. I have met intelligent people who make dreadful financial decisions because intelligence does not protect you from emotional storms. In fact, it can make you more dangerous because a sharp mind can invent elegant reasons for stupid behavior. The most destructive people in markets are often not fools. They are rationalizers. They panic with sophistication. They get greedy with spreadsheets. They dress impulse up as insight. They call ego conviction. They call envy urgency. They call denial patience. If you want to build wealth after 40, you need a filter that catches emotional contamination before it becomes capital allocation. That means written rules. It means pre-commitment. It means deciding in calm weather how you will behave in a storm. It means asking, what would have to be true for me to be wrong? It means knowing the arguments against your view well enough that you cannot be surprised by them later. Most people do the opposite. They decide what they want to do. Then they hire their intelligence to defend it. That is not rationality. That is internal propaganda. A good filter forces discomfort early, so catastrophe does not arrive later. This is where most people start to understand the real challenge after 40. Your enemy is not just the outside world. Your enemy is pattern repetition, the same bad wiring, the same blind spots, the same seductions, the same excuses, now with more adult language wrapped around them. By this age, if you are financially frustrated, it is very often not because life gave you no chance. It is because you have repeated the same handful of errors until they started to feel like personality. You overspent. You delayed. You denied. You let fear call itself prudence and comfort call itself wisdom. You confused activity with progress. You moved outside your competence and called it ambition. You protected your self-image so hard that you never studied your own mistakes closely enough to stop making them. That is why I like inversion so much. Instead of asking how to become rich after 40, ask how to make sure you stay poor after 40. The answers come quickly. Use borrowed money to invest. Spend slightly more than you earn. Be unreliable. Stop learning. Make decisions when angry, tired, scared, or euphoric. Step outside your circle of competence and pretend confidence is the same thing as understanding. Refuse to examine your past errors. Protect your ego at the expense of your future. Do these things long enough and the outcome is almost guaranteed. Now reverse them. That is not glamorous, but it is powerful. This is also where you must understand the psychological traps that become more dangerous in midlife. The first trap is comfort. Comfort is not the same as peace. Very often comfort is just stagnation with better furniture. You stay where you are because it is familiar. You keep the same broken systems because they are predictable. You protect the shape of your life even after it stops serving you. Then years pass, and what once felt like safety becomes a cage you built with your own habits. The second trap is the belief that it is already too late. This one destroys more wealth than bear markets do. You look at the gap between where you are and where you wanted to be. You feel ashamed. You compare yourself with people who started earlier or got luckier or simply made fewer mistakes. Then you freeze. You tell yourself that because the ideal path is gone, there is no point in taking the better path. That is denial wearing the costume of realism. Starting at 45 is not as good as starting at 25. That is obvious. Starting at 45 is much better than starting at 55. And starting at 55 is infinitely better than spending 10 years explaining why you did nothing. The third trap is self-pity. Self-pity is seductive because it feels morally justified. You have suffered, you made sacrifices, you had setbacks, you may very well have been treated unfairly. All of that can be true, and self-pity can still ruin you. The moment you start treating yourself as a special victim of arithmetic, you stop looking for leverage points. You become a spectator in your own financial life. You stop asking what can still be built and start curating explanations for why the build never began. I have no use for that, not because I lack compassion, but because self-pity is commercially weak. It does not compound, it does not repair, it does not produce capital. It only protects your current ego while quietly selling your future. If you are serious about getting rich after 40, you need a filter that rejects self-pity the way a body rejects poison. Then you need a system. A lot of people hate that word because they want inspiration. Inspiration is cheap. Systems are what survive here is the system I would want you to build. First, harden the perimeter. No speculative leverage. No chronic overspending. No fuzzy accounting. No dependency on heroic returns. No pretending that your emotions are reliable portfolio managers. No decisions outside your circle of competence just because you are bored, embarrassed, or behind. Second, build the base. Spend less than you earn with visible margin, not theoretical margin. Create liquidity. Pay down destructive debt. Make your recurring life cheaper than your recurring income by enough that you can breathe. If you cannot breathe, you cannot think. If you cannot think, you will eventually do something expensive. Third, increase the savings engine. People who start late do not need more drama. They need more throughput, raise income, tighten leaks, direct more dollars toward the reservoir. After 40, you usually do not make up for lost time by taking bigger risks. You make up for lost time by saving harder, spending cleaner, and refusing to interrupt compounding once it begins. Fourth, protect competence. Know what you actually understand. Not what you heard on a podcast, not what your successful friend does, not what you can discuss for 15 minutes at dinner. I mean what you understand in repeated, practical, durable form. Stay inside that circle for capital decisions. Expand it slowly through reading, observation, and small reversible learning. Do not confuse confidence with competence. Those are two different currencies. Fifth, prepare for the long periods of nothing. This is where most people fail. They think wealth comes from constant motion. It does not. The real money is often made in waiting. Waiting with cash, waiting with discipline, waiting with a studied mind, waiting while the world screams for action. Then, when the rare moment arrives, moving decisively instead of timidly. Most people cannot combine patience and aggressiveness. They either move constantly because stillness makes them anxious, or they never move because fear dresses itself up as caution. You need both. Long stillness, brief precision. That is a mature investor's rhythm. Now let me tell you the part that almost nobody appreciates until too late. The first $100,000 matters enormously. Below that level, compounding is still alive, but it feels quiet. You can do the right things for a long time and still feel like nothing meaningful is happening. That is the phase that breaks most people. They get bored, they get ashamed, they look around, they decide they need a shortcut, they start reaching for something dramatic because disciplined progress feels too small to respect. That is exactly when the filter matters most. The first $100,000 is not glamorous. It is manual. It is often built through repetition, restraint, extra work, and a level of consistency that receives no applause. But once that base exists, money starts to matter in a different way. At 10%, $10,000 changes nothing. At 10%, $100,000 begins to move the needle. The machine becomes noticeable. The engine can finally be heard. That means if you are starting after 40, your job is not to become reckless. Your job is to become efficient and relentless. More saving, better behavior, higher income, cleaner decisions, less leakage, fewer interruptions, more respect for base building, and do not misunderstand me. Starting late still works. It may not produce the fantasy outcome you would have achieved with perfect behavior beginning at 25. That fantasy is gone. Fine fantasy is not capital. Reality is capital. A person who begins around age 45 and consistently saves $2,000 a month for 20 years at a modest 7% return can end up with more than $1 million. Start around 50 and do the same for 15 years. And you are still looking at roughly the low to mid six figures, around $630,000. Start around 55 and 10 disciplined years can still build a meaningful sum in the mid $300,000 range. Those numbers are not miracles. They are the arithmetic reward for consistency. And consistency beats self-pity every time. Will that always deliver the ideal retirement? Not necessarily. Will it move you away from the worst-case scenario? Absolutely. That is the point. The person who says, "It is late, so I will do nothing," guarantees a future of weakness. The person who says, "It is late, so I will become cleaner, sharper, more disciplined, and more deliberate," gives compounding a surface to work on. You do not have to get rich 10 different times. You only have to get rich once. That should calm you down. You do not need constant home runs. You do not need to prove you are brilliant. You do not need every year to look exciting. You need to reach escape distance from your own worst habits, then protect the base as if it were sacred. Preparation matters, discipline matters, patience matters, decisiveness matters. Preparation means learning before money is on the line. It means reading when there is no emergency. It means studying how blow-ups happen before you become one. Discipline means doing the right thing when nobody is watching, and especially when you do not feel like doing it. Saving when spending would be easier. Waiting when action would look more impressive. Refusing leverage when it would flatter your ego. Patience means sitting in periods of apparent inactivity without inventing unnecessary movement. It means understanding that not every month must feel productive in order for every year to be productive. It means accepting that silence is sometimes the most profitable sound in finance. Decisiveness means when the true opportunity comes, you act not recklessly, not theatrically, cleanly, with capital, with conviction, and with a prepared mind. That combination is rare, which is why so few people enjoy the full power of it. Let me give you one more standard that matters more after 40 than before. Keep a record of your errors. Most people forget their mistakes as fast as possible because they want to protect their self-image. I think that is foolish. If a decision cost you serious money, serious time, or serious peace, it deserves to be studied. Write it down. What did you do? Why did you do it? What emotion was present? What assumption failed? Where did ego enter? Where did laziness enter? Where did denial enter? What would the better filter have caught? That kind of honesty is not punishment. It is maintenance. Patterns do not disappear because you are offended by them. They disappear when you expose them clearly enough that they stop running in the dark. At this age, the danger is not one big visible villain. It is recurring contamination, overconfidence, denial, emotional reactivity, comfort addiction, competence inflation, lifestyle creep. Those are the things that keep turning adults with decent incomes into older adults with fragile futures. So I want you to stop worshiping brilliance. Brilliance is overrated. Strategic humility is worth more. Know where you are strong. Know where you are weak. Know what game you are playing. Know what losses you can recover from and which ones you cannot. Know that after 40, the goal is not to impress the world. The goal is to construct a life in which compounding is allowed to work uninterrupted for long enough that it changes your position permanently. That is a different ambition. It is quieter, it is less photogenic, it is more effective, and it leads to something the financial industry rarely sells because it is too plain to market well. Dignity, the dignity of not being forced to sell in panic, the dignity of not needing to borrow to look successful, the dignity of having enough cash to wait, the dignity of being trusted, the dignity of reading, learning, and adapting instead of pretending you already know, the dignity of acting from strength instead of reacting from fear. That is what wealth after 40 should buy you first. Not status, Not applause. Not a story dramatic enough to entertain strangers. Dignity, you still have time. Maybe not as much as you wish. But more than your panic keeps telling you, the future is still full of opportunities. It always will be. The question is not whether opportunities will exist. The question is whether you will be filtered enough to recognize them, liquid enough to take them, calm enough to wait for them, and rational enough not to contaminate them when they arrive. That is the test. If you keep using youth strategies after youth has already expired, you will turn the next 15 years into a cleanup operation. If you build the filter now, you can turn the next 15 years into a compounding machine. So here is the door. You can keep trying to look smart, keep chasing excitement, keep justifying the same patterns, keep telling yourself that one big move will rescue you from 20 years of avoidable errors, or you can do the harder thing. You can become less stupid consistently, relentlessly, and without boredom turning you back. You can reject borrowed money, you can spend below your means, you can become reliable enough that trust starts compounding around you, you can learn without stopping, you can stay inside your competence, you can write rules strong enough to protect you from your own moods. You can build the first $100,000 as if your future depends on it, because in many ways it does. You can wait when waiting is called for, and when the right moment finally arrives, you can move like a man who prepared for it instead of praying for it. That is how you get rich after 40. Not by being brilliant, by building a filter so strong that time is finally allowed to work for you instead of against you. Now decide what enters your system from this day forward.